Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar on composing with Dorico music notation software delivered by the ISM Trust. I'm Daniel Spreadbury, Steinberg's product marketing manager for Dorico. I'm also a musician, keen singer, choral director, and it'll be my pleasure to take you through not only how to use Dorico to do composing and arranging, but also to show you some of the new features in the software as well over the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. Before we begin, a few technical points. You can't see me, but you should be able to see my screen and the Dorico software. At the moment, it's just showing the hub window. There's no music on the screen at the moment. You should also be able to hear me, but I can't hear you. So if you have any questions, please type them in the question box, and I'll answer as many as we can as we go through the presentation. And if there are any that we don't cover during the presentation, I'll try and sweep them up at the end. And again, I'll leave a few minutes at the end for you to ask any additional questions that have come up. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available to view on the ISM's website at ism.org/webinars after the webinar is finished. So with no further ado, let's plunge in. So I'm actually going to start today using Dorico SE. So we released a free version of Dorico in January this year, which you could download and use right now. So if you want to try Dorico, you can either try the full Dorico program for 30 days, or you can download Dorico SE, which is completely free, in which you can create music for either a single instrument or two instruments, and you can use that software forever. So I'm going to start a new project in Dorico SE and show you all the things that you can do with that. So I'm actually going to start with a voice and piano for now. So you can see here in the hub window that all the files I've been working on recently, and then there's a few templates, but of course you can create any combination you like of one or two instruments. So I'll start from the solo voice and piano template. And as soon as I do, I'm just going to resize the window a little bit because I've got the webinar controls on the right hand side. So I just want to make sure I can see all the controls inside the Dorico window. So having started my new template, I'm now looking at write mode, and write mode is one of the 4 modes in Dorico SE. There's an additional 5th mode in Dorico Pro, which we'll look at a bit later on. But you can see that in these 4 modes, you've got setup, which allows you to choose what the instruments are that are going to be in your music. Flows down here is actually the music they'll be playing. So Dorico is very, very easy to make lots of movements inside the same file. So if you were writing a musical or a songbook or a symphony, you can have as many pieces of music within the same file as you like. Another nice thing about flows, which is what we call these pieces of music, is that you can duplicate them. So you can use them as a way of drafting and sketching, which is very useful when you're composing. And then on the right hand side here, we've got layouts, which is the actual scores and parts that you might print or export at the end to give to the musicians to play for real. Write mode we'll look at in full detail in just a moment, so we'll skip over that just a second. Play mode is actually like a mini version of Cubase or a MIDI sequencer built into Dorico. Dorico actually uses the same audio engine as Cubase, which is Steinberg's world-beating digital audio workstation, a music production program. So you can use any VST instrument with Dorico, and all flavors of Dorico come with Halion Sonic SE, which is a little sample player here, which will automatically load the sounds that you need as you go along. You can also use it with any other virtual instrument you've got. So if you're wanting to produce high quality mock-ups and things, then you can do that very easily with Dorico, and it has all sorts of nifty tools, some of which we might look at later on. And then finally, print mode is where you either print out the music if you've got a printer, or you can export the music to PDF particularly, or you can also export into other formats suitable for uploading to your website or including in documents made in other programs. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about the other import and export features that Dorico has as we go along. So returning to write mode, because this is where all the action really happens, you can see that down the left-hand side, there's a thing called the toolbox. We actually have another toolbox on the right-hand side. Hopefully you can see where my mouse pointer is. So on the right-hand side, we have all these toolboxes, panels rather, for clefs, key signatures, time signatures, tempos, dynamics, ornaments, which includes things like arpeggios, glissandos, and so on, repeats, which includes tremolos, since a tremolo is at least a measured tremolo, is a kind of repeat, a very short repeat, typically within the beat or within a couple of beats. Then you've got bars and bar lines, holds and pauses, playing techniques, which are all organized by instrument family, so you can see all of the different instrument families and the common playing techniques that they use within there. Then we have our lines panel, and then video. So you can even attach a video to your project and use it as a means of composing the picture. And that features in all 3 versions of Dorico: Dorico SE, Dorico Elements, and Dorico Pro. Then there's comments where you can add little notes to yourself, or if you're collaborating with somebody else. And then the final buttons are for rehearsal marks, text, lyrics, chord symbols, and fingerings. And we'll use some of those as we go along. And on the left-hand side, as I say, there's the main note input panel, dotted notes, rests, chords, and so on. We'll use all of those in a moment. And then the main note panel where you actually would click to do the note input. Now, I'm going to try and show you a way of inputting notes that doesn't involve using the mouse, apart from just to tell Dorico where we're going to start, because it's actually really, really quick to type the music in with the keyboard. And so I'm going to be focusing on doing that. You can use the mouse for everything, but I think that one of the really great things about Dorico is that you can almost learn to play it as if it was a musical instrument. And so you can actually then become quite proficient at speeding through typing in music, even to the point where as you're kind of thinking of music, you can type it in without any bother. Now, I don't, today where I am doing this webinar, I don't have a MIDI keyboard, so I'm just going to be using the main keyboard on my laptop. I'm running Dorico here on a Mac laptop, but it's exactly the same on Windows as well, and all the shortcuts are the same. I'll try and save both the Windows and Mac shortcut when I say a shortcut, but if I don't, you can remember that Control on Windows is Command on Mac. So if I happen to say one or the other, you can just substitute either Control or Command for whichever platform you're on. So to start inputting, I double click where I want to input. You can see I'm going to start on the voice part. This orange line is called the caret, and it shows, it's just like the cursor in your word processor, it shows where the music's going to go. I'm going to start by putting in a time signature, and I'm going to put in a 3/4 time signature with a 1 crotchet or quarter note pickup bar. So I do Shift N, I type 3/4, and then I type comma 1. And so that then gives me, at the moment, just 1 crotchet beat. Now, the reason I type Shift N is that it's M for meter. And in Dorico, more or less anything you can create in the score, you can always create it with the mouse on the right-hand side here. But the nice thing is that you can create almost everything from the keyboard, and most things are created through what we call popovers. Here's another popover, Shift K for key signature, and I want a D major key signature, so I'm going to press capital D, and then press return, and it goes in like that. If I wanted a D minor key signature, I would type lowercase d. If I wanted, for example, a B flat major key signature, I'd type capital B for B, lowercase b for flat. If I wanted B flat minor, on the other hand, I'd type lowercase bb. You get the general idea. But I want D major for now, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, to actually input the notes themselves, first I have to tell Dorico the duration of the notes that I want, which I can do either by clicking over here, or better still, I can use the keyboard to determine the value. So the numbers along the top row of the keyboard, whether you've got a laptop or a big keyboard, they are the ones that control the durations. So 6 gives me a crotchet or a quarter note, so I type A, and that gives me that. I want a dotted note next. You'll soon recognize the melody that I'm typing in. 5 for a quaver. And then we want, now here's a fun thing. You might already recognize the melody by now. It's a folk melody, of course, My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. Now here I'm going to want a minim or a half note tied to another minim or a half note in the next bar. One of the neat things about Dorico is that I can just specify that I want to put in a note that is 4 crotchet or quarter notes long. So I just press 8, which is the shortcut for a whole note or a semi-breve, and press F, and Dorico automatically splits it across the bar line and puts in a tie. Then I can then do the next bit of the melody as well. Oh, we've put in a hairpin. That's not what I meant to do. I'm being too quick for my own good. That's the reason why. So if I do F. Now, the reason that I was fumbling there is that when I want to tell Dorico that I want to put a note in the octave above, I can press Shift and Alt and then F, and that tells it, because if I just press F on its own, it puts in the F that's closest. Of course, if you're using a MIDI keyboard, you don't have to worry about any of this because you just play the notes or chords that you want to appear. But if you're using the computer keyboard, you can also transpose the notes, of course, after you've put them in. That's also fine. But again, I find that it's sort of like learning how to play the software on a MIDI keyboard, because you sort of learn that you use, particular key combinations to get the result that you want. So I want 6 for quarter note, dot for dotted, Shift and Alt down, and then F, and that goes in up there. And then we want we actually want a 5-beat note, which is a little tricky to do. So we'll put in a 4-beat note, and then with that note still selected, I can now hold down Shift and Alt and press the right arrow key, and that extends that note. And this is a useful shortcut to know, because Dorico tries as hard as it can to be very consistent. And once again, as you learn how to interact with the program, you'll learn that you can use the same shortcuts for more or less everything. So I can lengthen or shorten the note by holding down the Shift key and the Alt key, and then using left and right arrow. But I can also use that to shorten or lengthen a slur, or a hairpin, or a line, or an octave line, or whatever it might be, or a tempo indication. As far as we possibly can, we make Dorico respond to the same commands in all circumstances, so that you can kind of, once you kind of get your head around how Dorico is put together, it can become a really, really quick and natural way of inputting music, because everything that you kind of learn can be applied to everything that you put in. Now, the next little part of the melody, of course, is the same as the opening. So I'm going to select that. So I've kind of noted that mode by pressing Escape, and then I can either click and drag over the whole bit, but actually I don't really want the time signature. So I'm going to go click on that note and then hold down Shift and then click there. Or I can also go Shift right arrow and I can collect up the notes like that. Then I can either copy to the clipboard with Control C or Command C, or I can just hold down the Alt key and then click where I want the next bit of the music to go. And then when I've copied that in, and then there is the remainder of the melody. Okay, so it was very, very quick to input that melody, as you can see. Now I'm going to quickly type in the lyrics. So lyrics is Shift L, or I can click the little lyric button down there. So you simply type the words that you want. You press hyphen when you want to put a hyphen in. You press space when you move to the next note. Should really copy and paste these as well, but there we are. Luckily, I'm quite a quick typist. Over the ocean, bring back my Bonnie to me. So as simple as that, you've now got the lyrics in, and you see that Dorico's adjusting the spacing, and everything looks pretty good. We've got bar numbers, we've got the keyboard part nicely spaced from the vocal part, so all is good so far. So now I'm going to write a quick piano accompaniment. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the melody in the right hand of the piano along with some chords. So first I want to copy and paste it, but I don't really want to copy the lyrics into the piano part as well. So I'm going to use a filter, which is a way of telling Dorico to either select or deselect certain things. So in this case, I want to select only the notes. So I go Filter, Notes and Chords, and now you see the lyrics are deselected. And again, holding Alt, I just click there, and that now gives me the piano melody. I'm now going to put in a bass part very quickly. So we'll have, well, maybe that should be up the octave. Oops, that should have been dotted notes, but I can lengthen it like that. Then we want the F, the octave below. And then, yeah, that'll do. Okay. Now, so that's so far so good, very straightforward. Then to put the inner part in, we can now work with voices. So voices in Dorico doesn't mean the voice instrument as such, although we have got a voice instrument as our lead line here. What we say when we mean voices specifically is when you want to have notes of different durations on the same staff at the same time. So if I want, for example, to have some block chords in the piano part here, in addition to the melody, then I'm going to need to have a second voice to do that. So to add a new voice, I hold down the Shift key and I type V. So again, just like everything else in Dorico, you create it with the Shift key and then V for voice. And hopefully you can just see next to the orange caret here that we've now got, it says plus and it's got downstem. So that means that I'm now ready to start inputting notes in the lower voice. So I'm now going to, again, one more key press, Q for chord mode or chord mode. And now we get another plus at the top of the caret. And that now means that whatever notes I type in, they're all going to go at the same rhythmic position. So if I type in 2 notes, they'll be stacked on top of each other as a chord, rather than one note being immediately followed by the other. And then in order to move on, I then have to tell Dorico I'm finished with the chord by pressing space or moving with the arrow keys. Now again, if you were using a MIDI keyboard, then of course you would find that it would just you play the chord, it would move on. There's no need for this special chord mode. But when you're using the computer keyboard, it's actually very useful to have this option. So again, I want dotted minim or dotted half note, and then I will put in an A and a D, shall we? So down the octave, and then we'll have a G and a B. And then this is slightly weird, kind of A6 chord, but okay, we'll go for it. Where are we? Where are we looking? This will be B minor of some description. So let's have, well, we've got the third up there, so we'll have that. And then we'll have an A7 there. Oh, that should be up the octave, or maybe not. So there we go. There's a very simple pen accompaniment made in just a few moments. And of course it's nonsense, but it will sound at least vaguely okay. Let's put in some other markings because those are also very quick to add. So for example, let's put in some phrasing for the singer. So we want all of those notes to be sung in one breath, so we can add a slur. So we select the notes we want to have a slur on them, we can just press S. If we want to then move the slur left and right, or extend it or retract it, it's Shift Alt left right arrow, very quick. You see that it's all positioned exactly as it should be. And then I'll just put in the last few of those. Ooh, whoops, didn't select the right thing there. So that's very quick and easy to put in. Let's put in some dynamics as well. And again, Dorico is clever enough to know that dynamics should go above the vocal stave and below the piano stave. So we can actually extend the caret out to those staves there. And then if we do, whoops, I've got caps lock on, type MP. Oh, I didn't really want it on the lower of the piano staves as well, of course. And then we'll have a crescendo perhaps. Maybe we'll just have a crescendo here and here. So again, we can select that. We can have a crescendo. You can just type the key on your keyboard that looks like a hair pinch. For a crescendo, that's the less than sign. And then we can have a diminuendo here, say, or maybe only to the end of that phrase. So like that. We can then, if we want to, we can group these dynamics together. If I put them all in one go, then Dorico will actually group them automatically. But if I put them in separately, then it will treat them as separate entities. But if I group them together, then you'll see that they align nicely. And here's an example of another nice thing that Dorico does for you. If you change the notes such that it would need to sort of get out the way of things, then Dorico will do all of that for you. And the nice thing about that is that in Dorico SE, where you don't have engraved mode, which is where you could move things around yourself, everything just gets out of the way of everything else. So even though you don't have lots of tools for kind of nudging things around, you don't need them because Dorico puts everything in a good spot. So we've got the basics of that. Let's put a tempo in, that's Shift T. So you type Shift T, select the tempo at the beginning, and let's just say, I don't know, Allegretto or something. And you can see that Dorico has a number of suggestions there. We'll go for 112 for now, that's fine. And you see that when I press return, Dorico automatically formats it all correctly, aligns with the time signature, and everything is all hunky-dory. One more thing we should maybe add, and that's the title of the piece. So we'll do that by going to Project Info in the File menu, and then we can type My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, and we'll say the composer is Trad. And then the last thing we want to do is, because there's only one flow in this piece, there's only one song. If this was a songbook, like a collection of folk songs or something, then we'd have set that title to, you know, folk songs for high voice or whatever. And then we would change this one to say, this one that says flow 1 to say My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. But because I've only got one little piece in here, what I actually want to do is remove that, which is called a flow heading. So we do that by going to Setup mode, and then going to Layout Options, which is this button down here in the Layouts panel. I can also get to this dialog by the shortcut Control-Shift-L or Command-Shift-L from any mode, which is a useful one to remember. And we just want to say never show the flow headings, and you'll see that as soon as we do that, now that flow heading has disappeared. Let's just have a quick look at what else is in layout options, because it is one that you'll want to be looking at from time to time. So the key thing when you start up this dialog, and if you haven't been in there before, it will show you what page size you're looking at, and then what staff size you're looking at. This listing here of rastral size is the old-fashioned size of the rastrums that were used by engravers when they were doing plate engraving. They're sort of the traditional sizes for music. Generally speaking, something for solo instrument or an instrumental part should really be between size 3 and size 5, and generally speaking, make it as large as you can comfortably make it, particularly if it's going to be played by somebody other than a keyboard player. Keyboard player is lucky enough to have the music right close to his or her nose, but other musicians are not normally so lucky. So try not to make parts smaller than 6 millimeters, and consider, other changes if you find that you're needing to squish the music down any smaller than that. And you can see all the other options that Dorico provides for things like page margins, music frame margins, which is for the top and bottom of the page, between the header and the footer, for example, options for flows and so on, options for page numbers and all these things. The nice thing is that we've tried very hard to make all of Dorico's defaults pretty good standard defaults. So you should find that when you start working on your project, none of these defaults get in the way. You might have to just either change the page size or change the staff size, depending on whether you start a project. Obviously in SE, you can't start for more than two players. But if you were in big Dorico, then you'd find that, for example, if you started from a string quartet, but then added more and more instruments until you had, say, a full symphony orchestra, you'd have to then at that point either change the page size or change the staff size, or probably both. And you'd do that from in here, inside layout options. One other thing we might want to do for here is we might want to show full staff labels on the first system. So we can do that on the Staves and Systems page, and you can see now that it shows the staff labels there. But if we don't want those, again, it's very simple to turn them off. And again, if you wanted short names on the next system. So the layout options dialog is a good place to look for all of these types of options to do with basically how the music is going to appear when it's on paper. Let's add a few more bits and bobs into here very quickly. Let's add some chord symbols. Let's start on the piano part. So to add chord symbol, it was Q for adding chords when you were typing in notes. So to add chord symbols, it's Shift Q for chord symbols, which is a terrible joke, but there we go. And so the popover appears once you type Shift Q, and then you can simply type the name of the chord that you want, and then you press either space to move to the next beat, but actually I'm only going to put one chord per bar, so I can press tab. And then we can have this, and then we can have A, and technically it's kind of an A6 if you like, and we can have D, and we can have B minor, we can have A, then A7. Dorico doesn't actually at the moment go through and add the chord symbols based on the notes that you've added, but you might notice if you can see the status bar at the bottom of the window, that if I select, which I'll do in just a moment, that's D over F sharp, and then we can say E minor, A, and then D, although really perhaps that should be A7. So you can add them like that, and I'll just move this out of the way so I can hopefully see a bit. So if I, for example, select just these notes, well, actually maybe I don't have enough notes in any of these chords. This one might have enough. You can see hopefully down there that it says chord F sharp, A, D5, D major. So Dorico does actually give you a bit of a hint about what chord you've got. If you select a collection of notes in the same voice, it'll tell you what chord that is. So there's some chord symbols. Now we might want to show chord diagrams for a guitarist here as well, so we can do that. Go to the setup mode, and we will then say chord diagrams. Now, of course, actually, in this kind of piece, it would actually be customary to show the chord symbols above the top player, even though the soprano doesn't need them. But if it's a kind of piano vocal score, then you would normally show the chord symbols above the top stave, and then we will then want to say that we will show chord diagrams using standard guitar tuning. Except of course that really it wants to show them there. What am I doing wrong? Okay, let's just go to above specific players staves for now. So there are the guitar chord diagrams as well. And if I want to, I can cycle through different shapes for that chord. So I can go to edit chord diagrams, show all variants of chord diagrams, and I can then choose a different fingering for that chord. I can also go in here and edit the chord, and as I move the dots around, you'll see that Dorico helpfully tells me that, at least according to a standard guitar tuning, which is shown here, that these notes don't fit, or rather that note there, that G sharp doesn't fit. Also, now that I've got a bar along the 12th fret there, that doesn't fit either. So you can see how you can edit that, and Dorico hopefully helpfully shows you what you should be doing. Let's not change that one. So very, very easy to add chord diagrams as well. And in fact, one thing that is quite fun is that, having added the chord diagrams, you can then go to play mode, and you can actually make those chords play back. So I don't know how well you'll be able to hear the playback of Dorico. It's only coming out through the speakers and then into the microphone, but so you get the general idea. But we can add, we can have, say, a guitar playing those chords if we wanted to. So we can go into the Halion window, choose an empty slot. There's a nylon string guitar. There it is. We can simply say, now we know that's on channel 3. So in here, we can then say Halion Sonic SE, channel 3, put the little speaker on. And now, hopefully, if we click on those chords, there they all are. And they'll play back. It doesn't play back any patterns or anything, but at least it'll give you it will just play the chord. And that can be very useful if you're writing a lead sheet. So if you just want to write melody and chords, you can then use the chords playback in play mode to actually check on whether the voicing that you're expecting or the harmony you're expecting is there. So we've pretty much reached the limit of what we can do in Dorico SE in terms of the number of instruments. But one thing I will do before we switch over is just show you that you can also change an instrument. So I'm going to change from the voice part here to, which of course also has the effect of transposing everything up the octave. That would now be rather painful for a soprano to sing, because of course guitar sounds an octave lower than it's written. And we can also now tell Dorico to show tablature. So again, you don't need to do anything in setup mode except for go to layout options and then go to players. And once you have an instrument or a player holding a guitar instrument, the fretted instrument section will appear here. And you can then choose, for example, to show either only tablature or notation with tablature, which is what we'll choose. And then you can see the tab appears there, and the score is now formatted automatically so that we've got 2 systems on each page. And I can also edit the tablature as well. So for example, if I wanted to move all of those notes down a string, and that would obviously move it up the neck, then I can do that with just by pressing N and M, which is a very useful shortcut. And in fact, N and M are useful shortcuts for normal instruments as well, because they do cross-stave beaming. So if I press M, I can move that selected note down onto the lower stave of the piano. None of those notes especially really want to be on the lower stave of the piano, so it looks a bit crazy, but for example, that one I might want to move, although again, it will flip the stem, and then I can press F to flip the stem downwards if I want to flip it. So you see how quick and easy it is to go from nothing at all to a workable 2-instrument arrangement. We'll just go back to a voice part here because we don't really need the tab at this point. And we'll make it now for tenor rather than for soprano, which keeps it in the same octave as the guitar was. And so I'm just going to save this a moment. My body, and then I will switch to Big Dorico and show you some of the other features that are in Dorico Pro. So just to reiterate, everything we've looked at over the last 25 minutes or so, all of this is doable in the free version of Dorico, Dorico SE. If you haven't tried Dorico SE and you'd like to, you can go and download it from our website. Just go to dorico.com/SE, and that will take you to the page. All you have to do is provide an email address, and then we will email you with a little code that you use and instructions to download it. And the email that you provide will then send you over the course of the next few weeks a series of short little tutorials that will help you to get the most out of Dorico SE and take you through putting together a piece from scratch, rather like this one, maybe a little longer in a bit more detail. So I hope that's been an interesting and useful introduction into note input, but I'd like to just now quit out of Dorico SE and then switch to Dorico Pro, and then we can look at some of the arranging features and so on that Dorico includes. And then we'll look at some of the other new features that we've added in the most recent versions of Dorico. So I'm going to reopen my Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, and I'm going to now add a couple of string players. So go back to setup mode. I want to add solo section players rather. So I'll add a violin, I'll add a viola, and I'll add a cello. And these go below everything for the time being, but I think I'm going to move the piano down to the bottom of the ensemble. I think now that we've got more instruments, I think it is definitely worth showing short instrument names on the subsequent systems and full instrument names on the first system. So there they are. Now I think we probably also, let's do away with the chord diagrams for the time being. So we'll say no chord diagrams. So then how are we going to write our string parts here? So again, if I had a MIDI keyboard attached, the one fun thing I'd be able to do is I could expand the caret to my 3 string parts here, and then I could input a chord, and it would actually automatically explode the chord that I play onto my string parts. As it is, of course, if I can only type 1 note at a time. So if I, for example, put in an A, and it goes in on every instrument, and so on. So, and obviously some of those notes are too low for the violin, but never fear, all of that is easy to fix. So now that I've got my basic parts, and of course another way I could have created something very similar just to show you, but I'll do that in a sec. First, I'll just show you lock durations, because this is quite a useful tool. So having put one rhythm in, for example, that's going to work for a part, but then of course some of these notes are nonsense because they're all the same. These instruments are now playing in unison, which isn't particularly interesting harmonically. So we can start note input, and then we can click the little lock icon in the panel there, or we can press L, and when we do that, the caret becomes dashed. And what that means now is that whatever I play on my MIDI keyboard, or whatever notes I type on the main keyboard, that's going to keep the rhythms that are there, but put in the pitch that I specified while retaining the rhythm. So that means that I can, for example, keep typing in where are we? Last system. Something like that, some useless violin part, but you get the general idea. But another thing that I could do is I could also, for example, take the downstem notes from the piano part, which are all block chords as well. So I can then go again, edit, filter, and in this case I want to say downstem notes. I can, in this case, it doesn't matter whether I choose all downstem voices or downstem voice 1, but I'll choose that because that's what I've got there. Again, copy it to the clipboard, then select these 2 notes here and go edit, paste special, explode, and that will then actually take the notes from the piano part and move them onto those instruments. Now, of course, because it turned out that for some reason I've got, oh, interesting, did I have the piano selected? I didn't. Well, okay, that's not exactly what I expected it to do, but you can see that basically you can paste from one stave onto multiple staves. I could even paste the entire piano part out onto a string section or a brass section, whatever, using explode in the same way. If I wanted to then add phrasing, for example, to the string parts in one go, you can just select all the instruments where you want the slurs to go, and you can add a slur with one key press. And the nice thing about these slurs is they're linked together, so that if I decide to change the phrasing for one instrument, then having created them in one go, then all of them will then be changed at the same time. Likewise, if I show the caret across the 3 staves, I can then actually add dynamics to all of them in the same operation as well. So all of these are very, very quick tools to to very quickly build up your arrangement and to rapidly add markings, experiment with ideas. One of the nice things you can do, having created these dynamics, is if I go to the panel here on the right hand side, choose this mezzo forte dynamic, if I make that one forte, you can see that all of them change to forte because I created them all together, which means that Dorico is linking them all together. In that way, you can very, very quickly build up an arrangement. One more instrument to add, just to show you very quickly that it's simple to add percussion as well. So add one more player, and we'll add a drum set. We'll add a basic drum set. Now Dorico has decided that, at least on this first page where we've got the title and the composer, that we can't fit two systems on anymore. So let's just very quickly reduce the stave size a little bit. We'll bump it down one notch to 6.5 millimeters. And now, still not quite there. So we'll go one slot more to 6 millimeters. And now it's still decided it doesn't want two systems on a page. I don't know why that is, but never mind. So let's now put in a very, very simple drum part. So we can simply go, I'm not a drummer, as you can tell, I'm a singer. So I'm afraid my idea of what makes a good drum part is no idea. But let's just put in a very simple little hi-hat thing as well. You can see how you don't have to worry about voices. Dorico worries about all of the voice things for you. And then I'm pretty sure the drummer's going to be able to remember that music. So I can now just select, for example, everywhere up to say here, and then go Shift R, %2. You can't see it, there's a pop over here, which then tells the drums to repeat those 2 bars over and over again. And then maybe at the end, we'll just have a crash cymbal or something. I'm sure that's exactly what a drum will do. Can't imagine why they do anything different. And maybe they'll play the kick drum as well at the end there. So you can see, again, very, very quick, and Dorico will actually keep playing those drum parts during the repeated bars automatically. If we were doing something fun where we're going to now have eight bars open for solos and 10 is going to start scatting or something, then we could easily add 8 bars at the end. So you go Shift B 8, that will add 8 bars. And then, for example, to show slashes, you can go Shift R. You can type slash, and that will then put in slash bars. It will number them and so on. So you can then show chord symbols there. There's an option to make chord symbols only appear when a player has slashes, all this kind of thing. All very straightforward. If I wanted to, just repeat the whole thing for a second verse or for the refrain, very easy to do that. I can just select the music and then just press R, and it's repeated after itself, and so on. So if you want to review any of the note input and editing things that we've gone over in the last half hour or so, then again, our YouTube channel is a great resource. Obviously, I've been through a lot of note input stuff very quickly, but you can take a more steady pace through some of these things if you go to youtube.com/Dorico, and there's all sorts of playlists organized there to help you learn some of these things in a very straightforward way, and you can go back and review them. They're very focused, typically only a few minutes long, each of them, and focused around a particular task, such as adding dynamics or using lock durations or working with voices or whatever it might be. So don't despair if you feel like I've gone too quickly through there. And hopefully, if you're familiar with other music notation software, then none of this is too alien, but you'll hopefully see that we've tried to make the way that you work with using these composing tools in Dorico nice and consistent and straightforward and easy for you to follow. I did also just want to briefly dwell on a few other little things before I show you some of the new features that we've added. One of the workflows that composers often have to use is bringing in material from other programs, whether it's a sequencer or possibly because you're working with a collaborator who's using a different piece of software. Dorico can import music in MIDI format and in Music XML format. The nice thing about Music XML is that typically the notation comes in pretty clean, but when you're working with MIDI, you might sometimes get funny things like, for example, you might have notes that are overlapping like this, or you might have very short notes that look a bit sort of confusing and unclear. And so one of the things that we've tried to add in Dorico is tools to help you sort this kind of notation out. If you imported a MIDI file from a sequencer that hadn't been quantized, or maybe had been quantized, so things are at least in the right positions, but they're not sort of written with sort of sensible notation durations, then there are a couple of tools you can use. So firstly, we can select this material. And again, this tool is both in Dorico Pro and in Elements and SE as well. And the edit duration menu here has some useful tools. So for example, you can do extend to next note. So that's effectively the same as make legato or remove any gaps. If the last note doesn't change duration because there weren't any other notes there. But let's say that we then actually wanted that note to last all the way to there, rather than having to use Shift Alt right arrow, as I was talking about earlier on, to make that longer, you can go extend to end of selection instead, which will then make that note as long as that. And the last thing you have to do is sort out this pesky overlap. So again, we can select any music with an overlap in, and then in the right menu, go to edit duration, and then go shorten to next note. And what that does, is deletes it entirely. That's not what I intended to do. So we can do this one and say shorten to next note. And what that will do is then bring that, oh, we'll delete it altogether. Well, I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. But what it should do is basically make that note look like that, which is what it normally does. So I don't know why I'm suddenly managing to break that. But so that's a useful tool for simplifying data that you're bringing in particular from a MIDI file. Other things that it's worth knowing about is that the tools that we were talking about to lengthen and shorten things, again, when you're composing, you might find that you need to move something, or you might want to scale it. So if, for example, you wanted to move all of that back by 1 quaver or by 1/8 note, then you can just hold down the Alt key, and depending on what your grid value is set to, the grid is this little beastie down here in the bottom left-hand corner. At the moment, that is set to an 1/8 note, but I could also, for example, set it to a 1/4 note, or indeed to a dotted 1/8 note, or whatever it might be. So I choose Alt left, and then everything moves back by 1/4 note, by 1/8 note, 1 quaver. I can move it back again. And the nice thing about this is that if it moves in such a way that the notes have to be split up differently by bar lines or by metrical patterns, if the music then goes back to its original location, then all of those original durations are restored. So in one respect, working with Dorico is a bit like working with a sequencer, because the note durations, as you would see in your sort of piano roll view or your score editing view in your sequencer, are very plastic. They're not sort of set in stone. They're kind of determined by where the notes happen to fall in the metrical structure of the bar, and how they then end up getting notated. But I can also, for example, shrink those notes down. So if I for example, just put on insert mode, and then I can do Shift Alt, then you see that all of the notes are now, so you see what started there. If I do Shift Alt left arrow, then everything gets shorter by 1/8 note while retaining the melodic contour. And if I do it again, now everything apart from the last note is an 1/8 note. And now, of course, if I go back the other way, if I now start getting longer again, the original note durations won't be restored, but instead everything will then become a 1/4 note, and then or a crotchet, and then a dotted 1/4 note, or a dotted crotchet, and then a minim or a dotted, and so on. So these tools are very useful for working with material that you're trying ideas out. And because all of it is sort of non-destructive, as it were, you can easily go back and forth, you can shift things around. You can also do things like change the meter in a way where Dorico will then understand what's going on and will rewrite the music according to the current meter. You can even get to the point where everything is split up like this, and then as soon as you go back to the original meter, everything is fine again. One other tool I wanted to mention is that working with tuplets can be a bit awkward in other programs. They're very easy to make in Dorico. You simply specify what the duration you want is. So in this case, I'm going to have triplet quavers or 1/8 notes. I want 3 in the time of 2, and then I can type them in like that. But you can also, for example, take a selection of existing notes and make them into a tuplet as well. So for example, I can take those 3 crotchets up there, press the button for tuplet, which is semicolon. It's sort of complicated why it's semicolon, but it's basically because semicolon is on an English keyboard is also the key that has colon on it, and colon is obviously the thing you have in the middle of a ratio. So it's just a simple 1-key shortcut that you can use to access tuplets. And it suggests the ratio of 3 in the time of 2 crotchets or quarter notes. And when I press return, you see that it moves the notes into a tuplet. And again, if I was to delete that tuplet bracket, rather than the notes being deleted, they just become unscaled as well. And one final trick to know about there is that if insert mode is switched on, then when I do that, then the notes will actually be made into a tuplet, now occupying only 2 crotchets rather than 3, and the subsequent music in that voice is then pulled in by the change in duration. And likewise, while insert mode is on, if I delete that tuplet bracket, then the music is moved back again. So this is really only touching on some of the tools that we have in Dorico for arranging, but you've got the ability to paste into a particular voice, explode, reduce, double, halve, turn into a tuplet, remove overlaps, fill gaps, lengthen to the end of a selection. If you've brought stuff in via MIDI and the quantization value that you chose wasn't ideal, you can re-quantize just a selection of music. So hopefully you can see that with that plus all the copying and pasting and lock durations and the other things that we've shown over the course of the last 45 minutes or so, there's a lot of tools for composing in Dorico that mean that once you've kind of got the basic principles of the note input and editing under your fingertips, it can actually be a really, really natural environment to try out new ideas and to use as a composing workstation. So we've only got a few minutes left. Let me just see whether any questions have been coming in while we're, oh yes, okay, so maybe I should look at these questions. Okay, so so Thomas has a question. I really like the look of Dorico using Sibelius at the moment. I do a lot of choral composition. One thing that really annoys me about Sibelius is how the magnetic layouts can sometimes cause lyrics words within the score to overlap and become too close together. What is Dorico's layout system like for this? Thanks. Okay, well, let me open up a bit of choral music quickly. I have plenty of that. In fact, here's a very short bit of Bruckner. So you can see that I haven't grouped my dynamics here, naughty Daniel. Let's just group these so they look a bit more pleasantly aligned and so on. So here's a very simple bit of Bruckner. Now, Dorico does actually have some special features for coping with lyric underlay. What it tries to do is it will try to preserve the rhythmic spacing of the music. Obviously, singers find it easier to sing music when the spacing of the music reflects, you know, the rhythm in the same way that an instrumentalist does, but of course lyrics do tend to get in the way of that rather. And so what Dorico does, I don't think I'm going to find any examples in this because all of these words are quite short and it's reasonably generously spaced. But if we let's pull the spacing in a smidgen, make it a little bit tighter still. I mean, this will make it really quite tight. So now we're quite tightly spaced, but you can see here that although we've got the same kind of proportionality of spacing, everything is pretty close to where it should be. And what Dorico will actually do is it will move syllables left or right on its own a little bit to within thresholds that you can define in order to try to preserve the rhythmic spacing. It will by default never allow lyrics unless you actually force more music onto the system than Dorico believes can fit. It will never allow the lyrics to actually overlap. And of course, there's lots and lots of control in Dorico Pro on the lyrics page of engraving options, which is one of the other multi-page options dialogues that Dorico has. And you can see that here there are various options for the spacing between hyphens and lyrics and so on. It's definitely possible to get really nice tight spacing of lyrics without distorting the rhythmic spacing. As always, our default settings are just that, they're defaults. I think that once you start using Dorico, you'll soon settle on settings that balance the rhythmic spacing and the lyric spacing pretty well. And of course, in engraved mode, which again exists only in Dorico Pro, not in Dorico SE or Elements, you can move the lyrics, and you can see that there's a limited amount where Dorico will budge the lyrics around, and then eventually, if you push it too far, it will then just leave the lyrics where they are, and you can adjust them exactly as you wish. Moving on, Klaus asks, is it possible to add harmonies to a written melody line without having to choose note length going note for note? Yes, so you can use the Shift-I popover. So I'm going to be horrible to the basses here by adding some notes above here. So in Sibelius, you could, for example, just use the number keys along the top row of the keyboard to build chords. Dorico uses the number keys along the top row of the keyboard for durations. So instead you do Shift-I, and then you type the scale degrees that you want. So let's say we want to have a 3, a 6, and then a minor 7th. And then Dorico will add that above all of those notes. And again, it just follows the rhythm that's already there. And again, if you're using this in an arranging tool, you could then have, for example, your drop voicing for a whole passage of stuff in the horn section, and then use explode to then paste that out across the whole family. Joe asks, what key did you press to stack notes and chord? Yeah, so that was Q. So when you're inputting notes like this, you press Q. That makes the plus sign appear to the left, and then anything I type is going to be added to the current chord rather than moving on. And then when I want to move on, if I don't want to put another chord, I can press Q to turn chord mode off, which makes the plus sign disappear, or I can press space, which goes to the next position, or I can use the arrow keys to move left and right. And again, whenever I want to turn chord mode off, I can just press Q again. So Thomas asks, does it have octavo as well as other layouts? Yes, so you can create any layout size you like. In layout options in page setup, we have a number of different default page sizes. Of course, you can define any size you like, but one of them is, of course, octavo. If you're going to make this an octavo, you then need to squeeze the size probably down a little bit more than that. Again, the nice thing about being a singer is that you get to hold the music as close to your face as you like, so you can have a smaller staff size without worrying too much about it. So Roman numerals, says Guillermo. So at the moment, Dorico doesn't have a built-in feature for Roman numerals, and that is something we certainly plan to add. However, you can, lots of users already adding Roman numerals to their projects in Dorico. There's a font you can download that has some of the special behaviors in, but it's actually pretty easy to add them just using Dorico's regular text features. So if I, for example, wanted to add, you know, 5, 7 or whatever, and then want that to be superscript, I can very quickly do that, and then add B and then make that not superscript. So those kinds of things are very easy to add. And you can even, for example, use the lyrics feature. If you're using a special font, you can use the lyrics feature to then kind of put them in automatically and advance along. But as I say, we will certainly add more dedicated features for harmonic analysis in future versions of the program. Thomas asks, does Dorico have an instrumental sound library? Yes, absolutely. So the 3 different versions of Dorico all come with different sounds. Dorico Pro comes with Halion Sonic SE, which is the sample player. It comes with a full orchestral library called Halion Symphonic Orchestra, and then it comes with all of the sort of so-called production sounds that Halion Sonic SE comes with in Cubase. Plus it comes with 30 effector plugins for things like compression, limiting, EQ, convolution reverb, conventional reverb, guitar amp modeling, all those sorts of things, and all of that comes with Dorico Pro. It also includes some special choral sounds from our friends at Sound Iron, called Olympus Choir Micro, which has some lovely straightforward vocal choral sounds, ensemble choral sounds, and you can add, of course, any VST plugin you like, so you can use any sound library you wish. With Dorico Elements, it's the same as Pro, except that it doesn't have Halion Symphonic Orchestra, and with Dorico SE, it's the same as Elements, but it doesn't have the Olympus Choir Micro sounds. But all the versions of Dorico come with sounds that you can use out of the box. So I did switch between Dorico SE and Dorico Pro. They are in fact, excuse me, they are in fact the same software. So it's basically just according to what license you've got on your computer as to which version will run. So you could, for example, run Dorico Pro on your main computer and then run Dorico SE on your laptop or whatever. And if you do need to switch back and forth, there is a way of doing it. I have a little program that I was using here to do it because it's just a bit more reliable. But if you are running, say, for example, Dorico Pro, but you'll want to run it as Dorico SE, because let's say, I don't know, one of your students might be running Dorico SE, and you want to make sure that the thing that you're asking them to do can be done in that version, you can hold down the Control key on Windows or the Command key on Mac when you click the icon in the Applications folder or in your Start menu, and that will then load the program as SE. And likewise, if you're running Pro and you run through Elements, you can hold down the Alt key, and that will run as Elements. Jeff also asks, yes, you don't want to take the USB key on the road. Fair enough. You don't have to. You can run SE with the Soft E license, or in fact, Dorico itself doesn't require the USB E license, so you can use the Soft E license with it as well. So maximum number of players mean instruments or parts? Well, so it really doesn't mean players. So technically, you can have you can still have doublings and so on in Dorico SE. So if you had a multi-instrumentalist who was playing a bunch of reed instruments, like, you know, clarinet, alto saxophone, and something else, tenor saxophone, whatever it might be, that you could have all of those instruments held by that one player. the restriction is on the number of musicians, as it were. I hope that answers that question. Philip says, how does Dorico deal with unaccompanied recit without time signature? Oh, well, it actually does that really, really nicely. I kind of launched straight into adding the time signature when I started my my initial composition. But in fact, if you start a project in Dorico and you don't add a time signature, by default, it's in open meter. And in fact, that means you can basically write whatever music you like, add bar lines wherever you like, and you never have to add a time signature if you don't want to. It's also possible to switch freely from open meter to measured time. So it's very, very easy to write unaccompanied recitative. Also things like reciting tones in church music. I'm a church musician myself, so do a lot of things like responses and plain song, hymns, and all this kind of stuff. All of those kinds of cantory things, antiphons, all of those are really, really easy to do as well, because Dorico makes it very simple to work with unmeasured music. Those things, of course, also really useful for working with things like cadenzas in instrumental music. Philip also asked, can Dorico deal with Gregorian chants? So Dorico doesn't have support for neume notation, but if you want to do modern notation, like you might find in the New English Hymnal or something, it can certainly do, as I say, freely metered music with or without stems, all that kind of stuff. But you can't do neumes with Dorico at the moment. You can have square note heads, but not the full-sized square notation, full fat square notation, perhaps I might say. Timothy asks, can you import Sibelius files and work on them in Dorico? Not directly, but Dorico does import music XML files, and all versions of Sibelius going back many, many years can export music XML. If you're using Sibelius 7 or the newer versions of Sibelius 8 or Sibelius Ultimate, all of them have built-in music XML export. You can just go File, Export Music XML, and you can export all of them in one go. If you are using Sibelius 6 or earlier, there's a plugin you can download. It's free from musicxml.com that allows you to then export your music XML files and bring them into Dorico. And of course, that works with any program that exports music XML, whether it's Finale, and in fact, most of the main sequencers now, including Cubase, Logic, and so on, they will also export music XML, which gives you another way to bring it into Dorico. Timothy also asked a very important question: how much does Dorico cost? Well, Dorico SE, which is the version I was using at the beginning of the session today, that's free to download. You can just go and download it from our website at dorico.com/se, and that's a great way to get started with Dorico if you don't need more than 2 players. Dorico Elements, if you're buying it as a professional user, is about £80, including VAT. If you're a teacher, then you would qualify, or a student in full-time education, you qualify for the educational pricing, which is about £60. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact pricing to hand. Dorico Pro, on the other hand, if you were buying it as a professional user, would be about 400 and something pounds. But again, if you are a teacher or a student, then there's an educational price, which is pretty much half of that. And in fact, if you are currently using another program like Sibelius or Finale, then we also have a special cross-grade price, which allows you to buy Dorico Pro at a discount. And there's a further discount if you are using if you're a teacher or a student as well. So effectively, probably very few of you who are watching this today would have to pay that full 400 and something pound price for the Pro version. Chances are you would at least qualify for the cross-grade, and you may also qualify for the education discount as well. And just a quick note on the cross-grade, you don't have to give up your existing software. All the cross-grade is that when you buy Dorico, either from our online shop or from a music shop, they will ask you for proof of ownership of Sibelius or Finale. All you have to do is just provide them with a picture of your serial number or the about box that shows your serial number, or proof of your subscription if you've been a subscriber to Sibelius for more than a year, and they will then give you the special price. And one last question. Oh gosh, okay, 3 more questions. Okay, I'm not sure I can get to them all. Charlotte asks, if I want to produce a high quality demo, can you edit the velocity of individual notes? Absolutely. There is a velocity editor in play mode here, which you can do all the sorts of things you'd expect to be able to do. You can sweep across them, all the rest of it. Saving to PDF, yes, very, very simple. Print mode on the right-hand side, which you can't quite see, or I can't see, you probably can see actually. There's a graphics button, you just use PDF, press export. And yes, in terms of licensing, all of Dorico's licensing is perpetual. There's no subscription pricing for Dorico. We do occasionally bring out new versions that would be paid for upgrades, but you can just choose whether or not you want to upgrade. There's no compulsion to keep paying if we don't add any features that are of interest to you, although I hope that we will. And with that, we are just about coming up on the top of the hour. So I'd like to thank you very much indeed for taking the time to watch the webinar today. If you do want to get in touch with us, we're very easy to find. Obviously, you can get in touch via the ISM Trust, but you can also find us on social media. We're at Dorico Official on Twitter and on Facebook, and you can also find us at dorico.com. Thanks very much, everybody.